This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Sports Files is made possible in part by
Infinity of Memphis has moved to Germantown Road, just half-mile north of Wolf Chase Galleria, and is proud to support WKNO for its quality broadcasting and service to our community. Quality and service? No wonder Infinity of Memphis feels at home on WKNO. The Lighting Source, major line distributor of commercial and industrial lighting, including hard-to-find bulbs and fixtures, as well as a broad range of LED products. With 35 years' experience servicing lighting needs, the Lighting Source proudly sponsors Sports Files.
The WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Today on Sports Files, we dive into the extremely serious subject of concussions in the game of football. According to the Sports Concussion Institute, 75% of all football players will at one time or another sustain a concussion playing the game. Some may be less serious than others, but let's be honest here. When it comes to head trauma, nothing can be taken for granted. Unfortunately, until very recently, it was. For decades, players performed despite head trauma. Some were never diagnosed. Some were encouraged to play despite injury. And some just continued to play on their own, like nothing ever happened. It was the way things were. Then it all changed. Retired players started to get diagnosed with ALS, dementia, Alzheimer's, and some would pass away at relatively young ages. And then there was suicide, Junior Seau being the biggest name in football to take his own life. Physicians started looking seriously into a link between brain trauma and suicide. Once the diagnosis started, the lawsuit began, a major concussion lawsuit against the NFL. And over the summer, a federal judge granted preliminary approval to a landmark deal that would compensate roughly 4,500 former players for their injuries. They said the NFL participated in fraudulent behavior in the way it handled concussions. So where are we today? Well, the league has moved forward with a structured way to deal with head injuries. Equipment is better. Rules at all levels of football have changed to discourage helmet-to-helmet contact. Programs have developed around the country to teach youth football players better tackling techniques. With that said, will the game of football, the most popular sport in the U.S., survive in the long run? Today we tackle the subject of concussions in football from all angles. I'll be joined by Dr. John Hayden from Campbell Clinic, former Memphis Tigers star tailback Marcus Doc Holliday, who would go on to play in the NFL with the St. Louis Rams, and another former Tigers standout and 7-year NFL defensive tackle with the Cardinals, Lions, and Giants, Marcus Bell. It's next on a very special Sports Files. Well, guys, let me start off with John. And in simple terms, John, what is a concussion?
Yeah, certainly you can get pretty complex with the way you describe it, but the way I always describe it is it's kind of like a shake or a bruise to your brain, and it's associated with a lot of these complex neurologic symptoms that you can have, but it doesn't have to be a direct blow to the head, but it can be either a direct or indirect blow to the head that's associated with all these complex or complex findings that you can see in the brain. Symptoms usually include headache, blurry vision, dizziness, sensitive to light, sensitive to sound, difficulty concentrating, a lot of symptoms like that.
The new NFL concussion data suggests, and you probably know this, the NFL players, guys, listen to this, have a 30% chance of Alzheimer's or dementia as a result of concussions. That's staggering numbers, John.
Yeah, it certainly is, and we know there are a lot of case reports and studies being done right now that are linking that. We don't have a definitive, absolute study that links it, but there is pretty significant evidence in case reports that there is a link between concussion or multiple concussions or even subconcussive events. Think about an offensive lineman, how many times they hit heads in practice or in a game. That's subconcussive, not really concussive, that does lead to those sequelae later on in life. You know, not only you have depression, you have dementia, you have increased incidence of suicide, and then multiple symptoms like that.
Doc, have you ever been diagnosed with a concussion?
Yeah, I got diagnosed with a concussion. We were playing at the University of Tennessee in 1992, and I actually got kicked in the head by a defensive end, and yeah, it was pretty bad.
At that time in 1992, when you were diagnosed, were you pulled right away out of the game?
Well, what happened is that only thing I remember is getting kicked in the head. Next thing I know, I was on the sideline. And when I was on the sideline, I started looking around, asking some of my teammates. Because I looked on the field, I was like, "Hey man, you know, what are we doing?"
Right.
They were like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Who?" I was like, "We're playing football." I was like, "Who we playing?" And at that time, you know, Eddie Canley, the trainer, came over. They took my helmet and they didn't let me play. You know, get back in the game.
How many times do you think in your football career, prep, college at the University of Memphis, in the NFL, you think you had concussions that were not diagnosed? You just got your bell rung, and you know that when you look back, it was a concussion.
No, dozens of times. Now that I know what a concussion is, because back then you just, you know, people tell you, you know, you got your bell rung, you know, and
you got back in the game.
And you got back in the game, you stayed in practice, you tried to shake it off. I know one instance for sure. When I was with the Rams, we were in training camp going against Chicago Bears, and me and this linebacker, we beat in the hole, and it's just, pow, it's helmet to helmet. I'm shook. I wasn't as bad as I was in the game, but I couldn't tell you what was going on. But the coaches patted me on my back, good lick, and I'm like, let me stay in practice. I'm trying to get a job. So.
Marcus, 7 years in the NFL, great career at the University of Memphis. What about you? What do you think, concussion-wise?
Well, I know for sure I was diagnosed with 3 to 4 concussions in the NFL. 2 of them, I left the game. They didn't let me go back in. A couple of them I played through, was able to talk to trainer, and this was early in my career, probably, 2002 or 3, around that time frame. But for me, the way it's been explained to me, anytime you see those stars when you get hit, you have a direct hit, those are signs of concussion. I did a lot of testing out in California and did a lot of studying, trying to educate myself on it because of the things that's going on in the NFL. And what I found out, I've had way more than I would even thought that I've had from practice, playing football since I was 8 years old until I was 29. I know I probably had several concussions.
Were you ever encouraged to stay in a game when they knew you had a concussion?
Not directly. I can't say that a trainer told me, specifically, or coach, hey, you got to shake it off to go back in. To be honest, majority of the times with me, with the concussions, I was more so, as Doc said, you was just brung up in the mind frame of just, shake it off and get back in there. But like I said, it was a couple times that, particular, I got met a running back in the hole and his knee hit my helmet. And I was more so, I couldn't really shake it. I couldn't pull it together. So a couple series went by and they told me, hey, you're done for the rest of the day.
We're better educated, John, now with concussions. With that said, how often are you diagnosing concussions from football?
I'd say certainly, so I cover multiple teams. I'm at the University of Memphis, I'm at Rhodes College, I'm at a high school, local high school here. I see concussions every week. I do. Certainly at the college level, I see it every week. I also I see it. I have my clinic is specially set up to see concussions from the high schools that we cover. So certainly my umbrella is a little bigger to capture that. But in a game itself, I would say you probably average 1 every other game.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Less youngsters are playing the game of football now for the obvious reasons, and most of that is safety reasons. Parents don't allow that to happen. But of those who let their kids play, they seem to have faith in the school, they have faith in the coaches, they have faith in the physicians that deal with their kids. So let's listen to a few sound bites from parents and why they let their kids play football.
Of course, but here at Christian Brothers, they do take precautions. They do testing, and their helmets are up to what the code needs to be for the helmets. He loves football, so we just let him play and hope and pray for the best, and hopefully the coaches have educated them on the best way to hit and to prevent any kind of concussion or any kind of damage or injury.
They've learned so much and matured so much from playing a team sport and fighting through adversity, and they've learned how to deal with failure, which is, I think, is a huge asset that they'll carry with them throughout their lives and will help them succeed. It's also opened all kind of doors for them. They're good students, but they're having a chance to get into selective schools because they also have the extracurricular activities of playing a sport. So I definitely think that in this case, all the benefits they're getting from it outweigh the risk. And the school takes precautions, they take precautions. We know what we're getting into going into it, but they've grown greatly and matured as young men because of their involvement in sports.
Doc, we know that you have a couple boys, one starred in the area.
Yeah.
We know, Marcus, you have one who did not play football.
Correct.
Doc, yours are little, but I'm going to ask you if you'll allow them to play football. Let me start with you, Doc. You had no problems, right?
No, not at all, man. Football is how I was raised, what I was raised playing. He grew up watching all of my old tapes, at Memphis State High School, a couple of pro games he'd been able to watch. And we loved the game. He loved the game. I never pushed football on him. He started playing when he was 7. Took him out for a year because I thought he was too young, but he loves it. I let him make the choice. I didn't push him into football, and he fell in love with it, and he's excelling right now at Murray State, and I encourage him, and I tell him, I showed him all the risk. I talked to him as well. They have great trainers up there at Murray State, so I've always encouraged them to play and continue with.
Marcus, you look at it differently with your children.
Well, for me, I think if my son was more so of a academic guy. I spent a lot of times myself with electronics, and he kind of gravitated to that and stayed away from the sports. We had a few talks about it as he got a little older, going into middle school and high school, and I gave him the rundown, and if he wanted to do it, I would support him, but I was very cautious and very wanted to give him a lot of information about the risk of playing the game because for me, I played the game. That's all I knew. I love the game, but I have seen the Junior Seau's, the Chris Henry situations, and once again, like I said, being a part of that, playing against those guys, and personally knowing some of those guys, it gives me a different feeling that I'm kind of glad that he didn't play. Now he goes to Middle Tennessee. He's going to school, be a computer information major. And I support him wholly in that, but it is the risk in it is a lot, I would say, more intense than some people think.
I hear you.
Right.
When I was young, there was no information. I think I still would have played because I played every sport as a kid. Now we're in 2014. Your kids are 4 in a few months or whatever the case may be. Will you allow them to play football?
People ask me that question a lot, and I always say I'm going to let my boys do whatever they want to do as from a sports standpoint. I played multiple sports. I even played football in high school. And, I think from the football side, the way I would look at it is I think football is okay to play, but maybe at a younger age, not so okay hitting in pads.
Okay.
Maybe at an older age, if you talk to a lot of the experts around, some of them even suggest maybe waiting until you're 14 years old before you actually do tackle football, and maybe do flag football before that. But if my son ends up, wants to play football at some point in his life, either of my sons, I would be okay with them playing.
You mentioned that you guys you're with a lot of schools, including Rhodes College. We went over to Rhodes recently and watched them play a game, and we talked to parents of these college players and got their reaction as well. And one particular response was very interesting on the safety precautions and concussions, and obviously something that's very important to everybody nowadays with the game of football.
When he came to you and said you wanted to play football, what was your reaction?
We said no, he couldn't until he was in 8th grade.
And why was that?
Because we thought that little kids shouldn't be playing because of injuries, and we thought it was too rough.
And now?
Well, and then in 8th grade we had told him he could try it then, and he tried it, and he fell in love with it. So then we decided it was his decision if he wanted to play or not.
Was there any consideration given at that point then to the head injuries issue?
Sure, but he has always been a bigger kid and sort of been the kid that was putting out the punishment instead of taking it, and so we didn't really worry about him too much because he was always a big kid,
Are you aware of some of the stuff that's being said now about the head injuries? And
Yes, every year we hear more and more, and now that he's an adult, we've decided now it's up, it's in his hands if he wants to play or not.
Has he mentioned it at all?
No, he just loves football. I don't think he cares, you know what I mean? It's like anything else. You ride a bike, you could get hurt. Play football, you could get hurt, and I guess he's willing to take that chance that he would like to play football.
Now, I know a school that's dear to all your heart is the University of Memphis. Obviously, we got two former players. John, you went to the University of Memphis, got your undergraduate degree. So this isn't just smaller schools and high school and junior leagues and biddy leagues and all that we're looking at. We're looking at higher level football at college level. And of course, we'll get to the NFL in a second. But here's Justin Fuente, the head coach of the Memphis Tigers, talking about this issue.
Well, first of all, you've got to teach the game the correct way. You got to teach how to tackle. You've got to teach guys to keep their head up to see where they hit, see what they hit. You've got to teach guys to play with proper technique. We've legislated part of that out of the game. Guys get ejected for certain activities, that sort of stuff, which has made I think a positive impact in trying to limit those nasty collisions that nobody, quite frankly, wants to see. So first of all is teaching technique. Second of all is you have to monitor it. You have to have a set protocol that you're going to follow through your doctors and through your head trainer that has the best measurables that we can find to determine how the kids are doing. And then the last thing is, and a lot has been made of this, but I think you have to be smart in what you're doing. You have to be smart and understand that you've got to get those things taught. You've got to be able to tackle. You've got to have. It's a contact sport, but where do we have it in practice? How's it organized? How much are we doing? That sort of.
Marcus, how much safer is the game today?
I couldn't give you a percentage, but from listening to Coach Fuente, a lot of stuff has been put in place to help the game. I mean, from equipment standpoint, from how referees are officiating the game, and just break down to the knowledge of the concussions, what can happen, and as he said, how to tackle, how to do things right. But I would say they are making huge steps into trying to prevent this. Me personally, I don't ever think it's going to be a way to play the game of football as I know it is tackle football without the possibility of a concussion or injury or anything, or any sport that you play. I think it's a part of it, but I think the education part is very, very important, and I think everybody on every level is doing a great job with getting that done.
You mentioned tackling technique. We heard Justin talk about that. Bill Muir is a former NFL coach with a number of different programs, number of different organizations, former coordinator as well. He goes around the country now teaching a technique called heads-up football, how to properly tackle. Here's Bill Muir talking about that and how important this is.
We're under the umbrella of USA Football, which is an organization, a relatively new organization, about 3 or 4 years old, that is trying to assemble a program that governs youth football. And I use the word govern judiciously. What we're trying to do is establish an environment that teaches safety, education in terms of areas like hydration, concussion, equipment fitting, all things that would help, participation to be safer. This is a contact sport that is competitive. So there are going to be collisions, there are going to be injuries. But quite frankly, these can be minimized if the approach is across the board, the approach is to a more educated way to play the game. Doesn't mean the game's going to change, but the one thing we really would like to emphasize, on the playing level is taking the head out of all aspects of football as a primary point of contact. So it was researched very thoroughly, not just by football people, but doctors, people who study just the physics of the body, and they developed a plan that they call heads-up football. And it's not dramatic, but it's a subtle way that tackling has changed, where no longer is the head involved primarily, no longer is the top of the shoulder involved. We stress keeping the head up and blocking with the front of the shoulder with the head to the side. May seem like a little thing, but when you're blocking and tackling, if you can begin to develop that, that's why, not that our emphasis is, but we'd like to start on the youth level.
Doc, it's a great step, but is it easier said than done just to tackle with the shoulder? We still see helmet to helmet all over the place.
I think what's being lost in all of this is that football games have referees. Most of these collisions are happening in practice. It's happening in training camp. It's happening in the weeks during practice. I mean, you have hundreds and hundreds of collisions. Now, it's easy, a 60-minute football game. You got a referee out there policing all of this, but and I think that I'm glad about all this education, but for years people have known how to tackle. They've known how to hit. I mean, it's getting a lot of attention now, but they've known that. But this is an aggressive sport.
It's a violent sport.
It's a physical, violent sport with some aggressive guys, some alpha male personalities, and that's why a lot of us play it, because it's an aggressive sport and we're alpha males. So it's always going to be an issue.
You make a great point about practice. How many of the concussions? I don't know if you know if it happened in a game or in practice. Are there a lot still happening in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you get a good number in practice. You probably have more in practice than you have in games, because as Doc was saying, you practice a lot more than you play. And certainly there are some thoughts about limiting the number of practices you can put helmets on, or number of practices you can put pads on to try to limit that. But yeah, it's definitely happens more prevalently in practice.
A federal judge, and I know, Marcus, you're up on this, Doc, you probably heard it, John maybe as well, but a federal judge in July approved a settlement in the NFL concussion lawsuit after the NFL agreed to remove a cap. So it's going to be beyond $675 million. It could be upwards to billions that these players, including Marcus, will be compensated for because of damages. And they're saying fraudulent behavior from the NFL. They knew about concussions. They let players play. Doc, you're not part of this lawsuit, and you could have been. Why not?
I mean, because I knew the risks, man. I knew it was a violent sport. I knew you could get hurt. I know about concussions. I know about tearing my ACL. I know about ripping up, breaking bones and all of that. So it was just something I was just never interested in. I mean, you probably saw one of the tweets I sent. I still get mail from lawyers trying to get me to join in on it. But I look at it, like I said, I knew the risk of playing.
You knew the risk. Marcus, you knew the risk too, but you're part of the lawsuit.
Well, 100% for me, that I'm a part of the lawsuit is because the era that I played in is one of the key areas where we start. Like I say, I played against Junior Seau, knew him personally, and Chris Henry, another guy, played with the Bengals. This is a lot of, with the CTE and the things that was coming up, started to come aboard. Everybody used to surface up. Yes, I think we all knew the risk. You can ask me, would I play the game again? Yes, I love the game. Until the day I leave here, I will love the game. I knew the risk. Me personally, I am on board from the standpoint with the concussion deal is to exactly what we're talking about here, is to help raise the awareness, to fight. It's going to be a major deal. We talked about $675 million. I'm sure they agree.
Beyond that.
It's going to be beyond that, simply because when they initially signed it, you have so many players, it's going to be beyond that, and it will make a huge statement.
Speaking of knowing the risks, Tennessee Titans running back / receiver / returner Dexter McCluster on the risks he's taking.
Yes, I've certainly had a concussion before. You have to be very, very smart about how you handle that. As competitors, we may get hit and have a concussion, but we still want to play. But nowadays, the doctors, they want to make sure you're okay. The health is the most important thing, and you got to remember that, this game doesn't last forever. So when it's over, you want to make sure that you can walk away from it, in the right state of mind.
And the league's taking precautions more and more to protect you guys, and your safety comes first.
Yeah, one thing I can say is the National Football League, they're doing a great job at protecting us. We're out there every day. It's a contact sport. We're going to get hit, but they're trying to make it as safe as possible, and I like that.
Gentlemen, I got a minute left, so I need basically a quick response to this. Football, we know a lot less kids are playing today. Is the sport in jeopardy down the road, way in the future? John, what do you think?
No, I don't think it is. I think it may be a little different, but I don't think it's in jeopardy there.
Doc?
Not at all, man. People dream about playing in the NFL. You make a great living. You have a great lifestyle. So, no, I don't think so at all.
Marcus?
Not a chance, not at all. Simply because it's the #1 sport. It may change, as we can see now. It's changed a lot since I played, since Doc played, but it will go on. I don't see that happening.
The NFL maybe mishandled if you just look at this lawsuit, the way they dealt with concussions in the past. But it looks like now, I guess better late than never, that they're doing what they need to do now to inform everybody, to educate everybody. Right, John?
Absolutely. They probably don't have a choice, honestly. But yeah, that's a good step that they're taking.
Yeah, you hope they're not doing all this just because they got caught and there's a lawsuit. You know, would it be different today if there wasn't that lawsuit hovering above them? You got to worry about that.
They're protecting their pockets, man. You said they're protecting players. They're protecting their pockets.
Doc, Marcus, John, thank you for a great job. Terrific panel. Folks, before we say goodbye, no overtime this week, but it does return next time as we take a look at the Grizzlies, who opened up camp this week. In fact, the Grizzlies will play their first preseason game next Wednesday when they face the Milwaukee Bucks in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And that'll do it for the show. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Production funding for Sports Files is made possible in part by
Infinity of Memphis has moved to Germantown Road, just half-mile north of Wolf Chase Galleria, and is proud to support WKNO for its quality broadcasting and service to our community. Quality and service? No wonder Infinity of Memphis feels at home on WKNO. The Lighting Source, major line distributor of commercial and industrial lighting, including hard-to-find bulbs and fixtures, as well as a broad range of LED products. With 35 years' experience servicing lighting needs, The Lighting Source proudly sponsors Sports Files.